welcome everyone to another Wednesday workshop. So this week we have Aserial Krabat here, who is going to be taking us through the history of the occult. So occult history, taking us through black magic and symbolism and the meanings behind symbolism, the history behind symbolism. So welcome, Aserial Krabat. Would you like to introduce yourself and take it away?
Yeah, well, first of all, hello there. Thanks everyone for jumping on. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the wondrous world of witchcraft and the occult. There's a lot of misconceptions out there because the occult is essentially very hidden and obscure and is a very broad subject. So, I took this opportunity to jump on and, sort of give you an entrance into the mythical and magical world of the occult and black magic. So, if you want me to start, you just let me know and I will immediately share my screen.
Yeah, please go ahead and share your screen.
Awesome. I'm going to do that.
I'm really looking forward to this presentation.
All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation? Just checking.
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, let's dive in. So, the history of the occult. The occult, the secret ingredient of every famous fantasy and science fiction film, book, or video game that has been sparking the imagination of mankind for thousands of years. The occult has always played a huge role in our evolution as a species and has been the hidden hand weaving itself throughout most of our Western society and civilization. Even though most people never really go beyond the very word and title of what this presentation is about, because they are afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows, the occult continues to influence our lives more than most people might think. So in this presentation, I'm going to give you a look behind the scenes and invite you into our world of magic and the supernatural, guiding and exposing the secrets of sorcery and symbolism. From the cradle of the world, where many curious forms of spirituality originate, to ancient Egypt's god kings, megalithic structures, and its colorful spirit world, to India's ancient Vedic teachings, written in Sanskrit, to the South American priests of the Incas and Mayans, to shamanic ceremonies held by natives in deep jungle territories, to the African worship of the Loa and the practice of voodoo, all the way to the Norse and Icelandic runes and gods, carrying their secret overseas with their prophets. No one is really able to outrun the influence of what could be considered occult. Entire civilizations have been built on these principles. So, in the broadest sense, the occult is a category of supernatural beliefs and practices, which generally fall outside of the scope of religion and science, and is sort of a melting pot for phenomena involving supernatural or otherworldly events and agencies like mysticism, spirituality, and magic. The idea of occult sciences developed in the 16th century. The term usually encompasses three practices, which are astrology, alchemy, and natural magic. That is the general definition, however, but the occult encompasses all that is outside of our mainstream science, media, and society. The word occult essentially means that something is hidden. Therefore, all things beyond the range of ordinary knowledge and understanding fall into the seemingly dark and mysterious corner of the occult world. Occult qualities are properties that apparently have no known rational explanation, which is why alternative sciences and forms of spirituality that fall under the occult umbrella are considered pseudosciences, even though more recent achievements within the field of quantum physics is paving the way for a modern science to come full circle, going back to its very root and giving a modern explanation for what could be considered magic or supernatural. Magic is a supernatural power to cast spells, conjure forth spirits, and to see into the future through specific methods of sorcery, where within one can find the secrets of witchcraft. The practice of magic and sorcery, and the belief in its existence, have persisted throughout our recorded history, while constantly evolving and changing throughout time. Magic, just as the rest of the occult world, has been wrongly depicted and demonized over the last millennia until today by religious organizations and our modern media, showing us evil and ugly women riding on their brooms through the night, Satanists killing and sacrificing virgins and babies to the devil because they sold their soul, or other creepy and terrifying stories that are the ingredient for nightmares. While there's always a spark of truth in every legend or myth, the reality behind these general beliefs of what the occult is and is not could not be further from the truth. The idea of magic in our modern society comes from a long background of legend, myths, and fairy tales, where a lot of superstition and deluded facts are interwoven within ancient traditions that are actually still being practiced today. The idea that one must sell their soul and that all witches and sorcerers are in league with the devil is coming from a very medieval control structure, forbidding any kind of practice beyond and outside the pantheon of one divine ruling boss figure. Even though part of humanity has moved on from such an outdated belief and embraces a more scientific view of existence, many still are, under the corporate spell of modern media, selling them the idea of evil wizards and bubbling cauldrons. The representation of arcane powers and supernatural abilities has gone from rather simple ideas like Mary Poppins flying with her umbrella to more flamboyant and sci-fi-esque ways like shooting colored sparks out of a wand as seen in the Harry Potter movies. The idea of magic and what it can be is limitless and deeply embedded within our culture, speaking to us through legend, myths, and real occurrences of paranormal like phenomena, mixing itself with the collective jambalaya of what these powers embody and reflect for us. Tales involving wizards and witches come from all different periods of time and from diverse parts of the world, showing off different characteristics through the observation of different belief structures. Divine forces have never been a one dimensional stock character that play the same role in every tale they're featured in. So, the common idea of such seemingly impossible traits like magic and methods of manipulating the very fabric of existence reveals a common connection and a hidden collective truth that has been around since the first civilization rose from the desert sands of ancient Samaria. Humanity has always thrived to push their knowledge of the universe and our existence further than our previous discoveries made. So esoteric philosophy and ancient wisdom has continued to thrive within the secret orders and lodges of this world, containing and guarding otherworldly information from the praying eyes of peasants and simple-minded individuals, so that only the chosen ones could stand above the rest of the world. Now, that was mostly because of ruling class systems and censorship through religious oppression that kept the spread of occult knowledge in check to ensure power over others, or simply to prevent one's own death through hanging or burning at the stake. Throughout our time, we have always had secret societies and orders that were formed. The ones that stick out and are considered to be the origin of occult practices are the Order of the Golden Dawn, the Freemasons, and the famous Illuminati. The Illuminati is a rather complex subject, however, that is mostly misunderstood by the general populace. The Order of the Illuminati was a secret society offspring of the Freemasons that was formed in the late 1800s in Ingolstadt by a man called Adam Weishaupt. Excuse me. The goal of the Illuminati was to enlighten the world and to counterattack the secret activities of the Freemasons and the Golden Rosicrucian Order that were controlling the political climate and education system at that time. The Order of the Illuminati was short-lived, however, as the group was dismantled and banned by the government and became a widely known bullseye for conspiracies of world domination and the enslavement of mankind by a new world order. There are many secret orders and temples in this world. They're doing very sinister things and have their hands into many pockets of our governments. That is for sure. But this topic is so broad and vast that it would blow this whole presentation out of proportion. All I can say is that people should rather look at what the central banks and the very top families of the 1% elite of this planet are doing, rather than immediately seeing the devil or the Illuminati handprint that's apparently being shown. If you really think about it, if there was a secret society controlling the world from the shadows, we would probably not know more than just that there is a secret society. The purpose of a secret society or lodge is to be secret after all. Therefore, most of them don't even have a name to go by. While many ancient teachings were only given to certain individuals or lifelong students of diverse spiritual arts, the practice of witchcraft and rituals was also found within simple folk traditions and more pagan religions, and has had an influence on our understanding of different forms of magic and its many currents around the world. So you must understand that every religion or spiritual tradition still implies different methods of communicating with the divine through incorporation of magic rituals found to manifest and alter specific circumstances in one's life or to consult with the spirits of nature. Before the Middle Ages, we had Greek philosophers like Pythagoras revealing to mankind the sacred geometry and structure of our universe through numbers. Magicians of the Renaissance were the first scientists that were discovering and experimenting with the nature of reality, trying to find new ways of understanding and dissecting it. Many modern sciences have their root within the occult, like the ancient practice of alchemy, which would later become chemistry, or astrology, which would evolve into astrophysics. Sacred knowledge of the occult is also found within Islamic cultures, like Sufic whirling, bringing its applicants closer to Allah through induced trance states. There's also the ancient mysticism of the Tree of Life, found within the Jewish Kabbalah and Pythagorean philosophy. We also find the application of sorcery and ceremonial Christian magic, calling forth angels and demons in the name of Yahweh through Solomon's seals. So since we're talking about seals and symbols, I want to dive into the very specific and important one that is commonly used as the logo or icon for modern occultism, the pentagram. I'm sure that most of you have seen and heard about the pentagram. This ancient symbol is seen all around the world and has changed its meaning and purpose many times throughout different periods. Pentagrams were usually symbolically in, were used symbolically in ancient Greece and Babylonia and are used today as a symbol of faith by many Wiccans, akin to the use of the cross by Christians. Many people who practice modern pagan faiths wear jewelry incorporating this symbol. Christians also once commonly used this pentagram to represent the five wounds of Jesus or to ward evil off as a protection seal. The symbol of the five-pointed star is also found within the golden ratio and can be seen in the sacred geometry of our nature. So here are a few examples of pentagrams found around the world. So here you can see the pentacle found on a house in Aweiler, Germany, that is dating back to the 17th century, which was once again used as a protection seal to ward off evil. Then you can see the pentagram inside the St. Peter and Paul Church in Karma on a big window of the north rose of Amiens Cathedral. Then you can see the pentagram showing up in nature as well through sacred geometry on a flower or on an apple. Also on the national flags of Morocco and Ethiopia. And of course as the representation of the five elements found within neo-pagan esotericism, showing water, fire, earth, wind, and spirit. So since the 19th century, the pentagram, excuse me, especially the inverted one, is mostly recognized as being the sign or symbol of the goat because of the French occultist Élie Lévy. Many occultists built on this identification and incorporated more satanic values with the symbol of the goat, which was then popularized by the founder of the Church of Satan called Anton LaVey. Anton LaVey saw the now famous symbol of the goat on the cover of Bazis Histoire, a book with 1,000 pictures about the occult, and used it for the cover of his Satanic Bible. The pentagram is commonly used as the identification and separation for two distinct paths and forms of practice within occultism or neo-pagan traditions that practice magic. The upside pentagram is normally associated with white magic and the so-called right-hand path, while the inverted one is commonly used as the symbol for black magic and the left-hand path. So, what is the difference between white magic and black magic then, or the left-hand path and right-hand path principles? Black magic is unique in that its philosophies and operations have no concern for the morality of your actions, but only for the effectiveness of them. Practicing black magic does not require you to be an evil person, not at all, to sacrifice animals on the full moon, or to be filled with negativity all the time. What is required, however, is that you have a desire in you for power, for control over your life and all of its circumstances. It is also required that you put away the silly notion that having all the wealth, love, sex, influence, and power that you desire is somehow wrong or destructive. The practitioner of the left-hand path recognizes that they are the god of their own existence, the master of their own destiny. It is upon it is up to you to write your own rules and ethical code which governs your life. The interest into the occult has always gone through periodical waves of curiosity, before being shelved for decades again, only to be found by uninitiated adventurers that will stumble upon it and ignite a viral spread of such messages all over again. As our primary focus and mindset shifted during the Industrial Revolution, we started gravitating towards more scientific and measurable principles rather than simply accepting an outdated form of compliance found within the Catholic Church. The ancient God of Abraham was pushed to the wayside in order to analyze creation and make room for the modern world as we know it today. God was no longer worshipped, as our attention shifted towards the creation as a whole, rather than blind faith and almighty old dude will punish you for your sins. We were beginning to dissect and study our reality and focusing our truth on things that could be measured and observed. The beginning of the 20th century, however, has brought many old forms of spiritual systems and repackaged them for their current time, like the so-called King of the Witches, Gerald Gardner, who formed a well-known and popular form of witchcraft through religion called Wicca. Another huge influence on the occult was a man called Aleister Crowley, who called himself the Great Beast. He was Gardner's direct counterpart and is responsible for the less restrictive religion of Thelema, incorporating high magic rituals and demonic forbidden rites within his teachings, and declaring that to do as thy will shall be the whole of the law. Both of these magic religions have survived until today, finding many modern expressions through different perspectives and ways of practice within pagan, New Age, and Luciferian communities. But as the tides move, the subtle world of our spiritual nature was once again cast into the shadows and dark corners of the occult, and brushed off as simple superstition by the general populace, until metaphysics and the rise of New Age teachings would decades later ignite the divine spark within us and bring us closer to our own divinity. Witchcraft and magic has experienced a huge surge in popularity within modern forms of New Age spiritualism and is more alive than ever before. Witches and sorcerers have come out of their prune closets to proudly show up their forms of spirituality, wearing and showing their affiliation with the divine openly on their skin, clothing, and lifestyle. Your neighbor, your teacher, or even your lawyer could be a witch. We come from many different walks of life, and some of us choose to proudly present our way of living on various social media platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and co, revealing our altars, crystals, and other tools used within the craft. We no longer hide in the shadows because we have done so for way too long. The internet has allowed us to connect and unite with each other better than ever before. And for the first time in history, witches, magicians, sorcerers have all come out of their shadows to show the world that we exist. Witchcraft, magic, and witches and magicians, sorcerers, we are not just figments of your imaginations or the product of Hollywood. We are here and we are real. We always have been, and we are many. So we are shining our light onto the magical path so that others who hear the word may start embracing their higher calling. Thank you, everyone. That was the presentation, short presentation of the history of the occult and black magic. Now, I do know that I don't know how long it was, 20 minutes, that there could have been more. But since the occult and mysticism is such a huge topic, there will always be time for another presentation. So once again, thank you everyone for listening and joining in today. I'm
Thank
going
you
to
so
stop.
much.
You're welcome.
Aserial, that was amazing. I so enjoyed, oh, my camera's off, sorry. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. The presentation was so good. I really want to open up the floor. I actually have a few questions myself, but what I really want to do is open up the floor to everyone else.
Yes, feel welcome to ask any kind of question.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, please come off mute and ask Aserial Krabat yourself, or you can put it in the chat and I'll read it out.
I have a question. On one of the symbols, like I don't have my drawing's not the greatest, but forget it. I'll just explain it. So it was like a star with the goat in the middle, and then they had like little symbols throughout the depiction, and it went from like a small shape to a bigger shape. So what are those shapes exactly, and like what do they mean?
So that all depends on where you get the symbol from, but usually it's a Hebrew.
It's from your screen. It's from your screen.
Oh, from you mean when I showed the goat symbol? You mean the
Yeah,
symbols around it?
and then in the middle is a goat's head, and then around has these like cut out like squiggly thingies,
Yeah.
and like it goes from like a big squiggly to like smaller ones, and I'm just wondering what the symbolism of each of the squiggly is. That's
Also, I'll see that's Hebrew. Now I don't know Hebrew, but there's a lot of Kabbalistic influence in magic, and that's why I tried to put that in there. A lot of times, it just means that the adversarial path is within that, but I really can't tell you what exactly the Hebrew stands for within that certain symbol, because there's multiple relations on that. But usually I just take the main goat hat and then just put like Sanskrit or even cuneiform, which is ancient Sumerian scriptures, around that to represent that symbolically what the symbol stands for.
okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I actually have a question. Nico, this is actually a serious question. In your opinion, since you deal with supernatural beings, especially the demon ones, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Okay, in your actual opinion, there's so many people that says, "Oh, the demons are good. Oh, the demons are bad. Oh, the demons this, the demons that." What is your personal and experienced opinion?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you for that. So when it comes to demons, now there are demons And then there are demons. The thing is with the demons that essentially are worked with within the left-hand path. Let me just like grab something real quick, if I can find it. Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, that's not the one. Are just demonized old ancient gods that were essentially made a demon by the Christian church over 1,000 years ago. Because what you have to realize is that when you had old pagan religions, not only did Christianity come in and try to convert people, they also took their holidays and everything around that was already practiced and just put the Christian mark on that. So of course there were like some religions that survived and had an integrity of their own divine pantheon that it like existed and survived along with that. But essentially like ancient beings and gods from Sumeria, Babylonia, and even Egypt were satanized and were of the devil. You know, so there were some Roman figures as well, but they were kind of left aside. So they really did focus on like ancient gods that were worshipped. But essentially anything that was outside of the Christian pantheon, even the Jewish or the more Kabbalistic Judeo-Christian part, was also called of the devil, as there's always one true God, and everything outside of that belongs to it. So demons are not evil, nor are they good. But then it depends on what demons you're working with. Now, the archetype or the energy of what we or normal people see as a to be demonic can be mischievous and can definitely have a very negative effect on your life. But these are more like trickster spirits, because like in the realm of our existence, which is endless and so vast on multiple frequencies and layers of existence, anything is possible and everything exists. So when most people talk about demons, the demons they refer to do incorporate like these sort of aspects, but the demons that are worked with within the left-hand path traditions are more like ancient gods. But at the same time, when you're working with these ancient gods, the thing that happens is when humanity itself starts to move away from certain gods, either they are self-created by us or they came into existence before us, it doesn't matter. They do take on different masks and characteristics, and that is seen all around the world, where you have one god being presented in one pantheon system in a different country, while they actually worship the same god just with a different name in a different country. And that is also happening within the more demonology aspect of magic, where these ancient demons now have their demonic mask. Like, for example, I would like to show you a different one, but I have some seals here, which is Belial, and we got a Baal, which are normally associated together. But there's one very interesting one, which is the best to make that example, which would be the love goddess Astarte, which is also about sex, love, and war, who comes from Samaria, which was then later demonized by the Christian church and then called Astaroth, which is now a sex demon or an incubus. Now, these both divine beings still exist, either on the astral plane or the mental planes, and are connected to the source, but it depends on how you're connecting to it. So they're still the same being, but they're just expressing themselves through different avenues where their consciousness is focused upon. The same way your human soul has multiple aspects of where you are currently residing within existence. You have multiple incarnations, multiple timelines on where you currently exist. So it really, comes down to what you want to work with. So if you want to work with like the demonic aspects of that, you can go ahead and do that, or you can go back a little bit further and start calling on them with their old masks and their old names. But there's also difference in power within that, because the further you go back in time and less people worshiping these gods and working with them, the energy also diminishes, because within our physical plane we are working with the divine, which is sort of outside of the material realm. So while still being connected, and you need to feed something and give it energy. Everything here is a structure and it's being fed with energy. So if a god has not been worshipped for thousands of years and has only been worked with, by a magician and sorcerers, that energy might be stronger than the one of the ancient god that is not really touched anymore. So I hope that sort of answers your question in a way.
Yes, it did, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So if someone was interested in beginning down the left hand path, where or what source of information would you suggest or recommend for them?
That's also a good one. Now that really depends. There's a lot of great offers and magicians, but if you really are looking for left-hand path principles, there's a guy called E.A. Coeting, for example. There's a lot of controversy about him because he essentially made everything that was about the left-hand path public, and a lot of stuff that is practiced on the left-hand path is not considered to be, okay with society because there are no boundaries. But he is the best place to really start. He has a YouTube channel called Become Living God. I would recommend that. Then there's
What's
Michael
what's his name again?
E. A. Coeting. Let me just type it out, maybe in the chat.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So there's that. There's also Michael W. Ford, who has many, many books written on left-hand path principles. Now, if you want to also check out Aleister Crowley, those sort of the forefather for that, definitely do that as well. But yeah, there's just too many sources. So I would recommend like E.A. Coeting, Michael W. Ford, Aleister Crowley, and also my YouTube channel because I also talk about that.
Gotcha.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? I have one question. Well, I actually have a few. I've written down quite a few.
Go ahead.
In terms of, do you ever get people come to you and basically say, when you're promoting, I guess, Aleister Crowley's work, do you ever get like really negative comments and
No, not really, because Philema is a religion for itself. Now Aleister Crowley also gets a bad rap, like everyone that is sort of associated with black magic, because of having no boundaries and making up your own rules. Sort of, you find a lot of characters and certain individuals in there that do fit into like categories of the stereotypes. But once again, then you have people that totally do not fit in because you just can't put everyone in the same drawer. But Aleister Crowley is just like he's always mentioned, he's always in the background. But even nowadays, with so many other, magicians and sort of like teachers about magic principles, there's just a lot of mix that comes into that where Aleister Crowley is not, doesn't play the biggest role anymore.
Okay, yeah, I heard he has links to George Bush.
Well, see, that's the whole conspiracy part of this, because once again, there are secret societies and lodges and orders that have been here for thousands of years. Even then, after Christianity was sort of the main cultural religion within our society in the West, there were the secret societies that were doing their things, behind the scenes, and mostly they were rich people because they were trying to, hide from the church and the government, which is also sort of the same. So you always have that influence and like influx into that. But there's also orders that essentially have nothing to do with occult principles, but sort of use the umbrella for that. Because there's the Order of the Skull and Bones, which is associated with the university that Bush went to. And that's sort of like I don't know. I saw a documentary about it, and they have their own rituals, but that's more about the elite doing their own, sinister things to, bind themselves together and to stay in power in a group, which was also revealed with Epstein and his islands, where children were trafficked to, because that has always been a main focus and aspect where the Satanists are doing, these evil things and sacrificing children, which I do have to say that these things sadly do happen. There's a lot of things that happen in this world that most people don't know of, and when you are part of the occult and you have connections, you do get to know people that know people that know people, and you sort of see a map of truth that's being revealed. So there is for sure stuff like that going on, but then once again, that is just the case with physical reality. It's chaos and order at the same time. So anything will happen, and if it's not okay with normal society, and if it's considered to be evil, of course it will be done in the shadows. So yeah, there's that.
So do you consider like basically occultism is not good or bad? It's basically the intention that is put behind it.
Oh, absolutely. No. Well, it's the intention that you have behind it. Nothing in existence is good or evil. You know, it really comes down to the perspective of the human being that is analyzing it. So if you, for example, if an advanced alien race starts to, I don't know, comes here, comes tomorrow on this planet with their big mothership, and they start killing off people and just dragging us on their fucking motherboard on their motherships and just dissecting us and cutting us open. From their perspective, we are just ants that they're dissecting and putting into zoos and doing tests on. In their mind, in their opinion, that is not evil at all, because they're just way above that. For us, seeing that down here, people being slaughtered and being adopted, that is evil. But then that's once again comes down on how you see and observe the world.
Yeah, I quite understand what you're saying. I think it can go into like a lot of many different directions here. I'll come back to that. But someone, Scott here is asking, can you talk about Jack Parsons, his attachment to NASA and the occult? Can you make a comment on that?
Now, if I'm not mistaken, now I do I don't have the biggest book knowledge on the occult. I'm really like self-taught magician that just practices a lot. But if I'm not mistaken, that's the guy that sort of was behind the invention of the rockets. I never really dived into this whole topic, but I know that that comes back to the topic of a lot of occult stuff in being involved within our society and sort of like paving the way for science. There was always a factor that sort of came from mythical understandings and more spiritual sciences that developed in the background, and essentially rockets. Also the Nazis that were also involved with Operation Paperclip and stuff like that. They used what they had gathered from esoteric gnosis and other stuff and incorporated that within modern science and sort of merged that. But sadly, I cannot fully talk about Jack Parson because I don't really know much about it, so I don't want to slaughter anything or talk about something I don't know much about. You're muted.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have a question, but I don't know if this applies to the topic. I'm like through my practice, I'm coming across something, but I'm not really sure how to approach it. Because you said something about like perception. So lately, when I just talk to people in general, even like if they're not having a service, I don't know if it's my tonality of my voice or what exactly that's going on, but spirit seems to be coming out to speak with me through them. So one lady, it was her goddess self, her higher self came out to speak with me. Another person, it was a Sirius B, like I think it's ET. So they just like what happens is like the people they just go in trance, and then the spirit comes out. Do you have an idea?
So I mean, you mean when you are like talking to certain
Just
individuals?
regular, like I'm talking to you now.
Okay. Well, what can happen when, like, for example, when someone is in a meditative state, there's once again both factors that play a role: the spiritual
Yeah.
aspect and also the physical. Like your brain has different gamma states, theta gamma sync states, where you have brain waves going on, which can be now measured. That's why I sort of in the beginning said, modern science is now sort of shaking the hand with the occult, where that can be measured and observed. But sometimes, especially when you are receptive to these energies, it's either because you are an open portal for these divine communications to come through, so you see that aspect in them and you hear the message coming from the divine self, or it is them themselves, just really talking through their divine higher self, through their egoic self, their mask, and then giving you certain information. But it's definitely both, because you're picking up on it even if they don't pick up on it. That can happen.
They're like off somewhere else, and it's like the entity comes out to speak with me, and I think it's cool. But like like I don't know what's happening sometimes.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of times, like, it depends on how you like. There's always a scientific approach to that, and that's sort of also done in like the left hand path. It's spiritual but scientific. With some people, there can be like spirits attached to them that might
Mm-hmm.
come out as in certain circumstances. Could be family members, or it could be something else entirely, or it could be a glimpse of their higher self or their spirit, sort of coming out of them. But then it depends on you, how you see that person, and how you can divine into them and seeing their God self. Knowing how it's done, you can then go onto the astral planes or go back and into the funnel of what they are and their being, and see
Okay.
where they're coming from, and then sort of check and analyze. Okay, what spirit just came out of them, and see what it really was. But it does happen for sure.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Before I jump in and start asking my few. So there's a lot of misconceptions around symbols being evil, right? Is that mainly down to our conditioning?
Yeah, see that comes back to the whole Baphomet thing, and just the conditioning of human society, where we're taught that something is wrong, something is right. But if, for example, if you go back to the Vedic scriptures, back to India, or even to Buddhist monks, which also have their knowledge coming from India, um, they sort of survived within their religious pantheons of Hinduism and the polytheistic approach to that. Um, these symbols are also used now within the occult, and they became occult. So anything that was sort of spiritual and about the divine spirit within yourself, which is also the yogic path, of realizing samadhi, which is realizing you are nothing and everything at the same time. You have certain frequencies, and these frequencies on the physical plane, are represented as symbols or certain objects. And because of the church, these symbols were demonized and were put into a closet, and studied by secret magicians that were all working for kings and queens, or just really worked in the shadows. So that's why some certain symbols are considered to be evil. Same thing, for example, best example is the swastika, which the Nazis used, which was an ancient symbol for luck. They inverted it and they used it for their own purpose. Now you can't really use that swastika anymore, and without being called a Nazi, which is totally fine because it is what it is. It's that symbol now. It's became the Nazi symbol. But if you go back to India, it doesn't represent that at all. You have Buddha statues and you have temples with that symbol on it, and it has nothing to do with hatred or racism.
Yeah, I understand. So basically, when someone has, so for example, if they see the Baphomet and that immediately they think, oh, that's evil, like what would you advise that they do? Basically to detach themselves from the meaning of that symbol, or?
Well, it depends. For example, if someone comes to me, like, so, especially because I'm public about it, I'm public persona, and when people around here that see that, they a lot of them have perceptions about me, or like their own understanding of what I am, what I'm not. When someone comes to me and tells me, you're a black magician, you're evil, I sort of try to make them understand by observing them and like just knowing how they view the world, just by analyzing their speech, their body structure, the body like function, how they move themselves. You can sort of tell, okay, this is where the category they sort of come from, without judging them too much. So I give them the information that they might need to maybe reconsider judging by books that just misrepresent a certain information. Like, for example, if someone comes with me to me with the Baphomet thing and say it's the sign of the devil, it's actually not. It represents the cosmos itself, the as above so below, the micro and the macrocosm, and the divine and female and male aspect together. So I sort of always give them little glimpses, but you can't be hardcore about it, because you might have a Christian in front of you, and they're open about it. Sure, you can sort of like kind of go into that, but just always be cautious, because you don't want to just wave your spirituality and religion in their face like others are doing it. So
Yeah.
it's difficult, especially when the occult, because there's just so many subjects and topics and fields that it's just huge.
Yeah, I understand. When you're working with the spirits and the demons, do you visually see them?
Yes.
And you, well, obviously this is a stupid question, but you obviously don't feel fear, right?
No. Well, we all start somewhere. Especially, well, I was a devout Christian. I was actually in the Catholic Church, and I was an altar boy, or a ministrant, as they're called. So I was always involved with some sort of spirituality, or religion, one of another. And then I moved away from that, and I started to, because of samadhi, which would happen to me, of the conscious awakening, or that moment of enlightenment, which there's no essential true enlightenment. Enlightenment is also subjective to the individual. But the samadhi moment of, expanding your conscious awareness to be everything at the same time, and then stumbling upon certain informations, it just sort of opened the floodgates for certain information and understandings to come into my life, where I just had to separate myself from that. And once I've done that, I was programmed for so many years, with my upbringing as a kid until my early teen years, that I sort of still had that within me. So the way I moved away from that was also, saying goodbye to God, which I still thought was God back then, by the false God, just a weird example of that. And then just, pushing that to the wayside. And then once I fully got into my practice, which was around 10 years ago, well, more 6 years ago is when I really started heavily practicing, the techniques of it. Um, I I was scared because, it first of all takes time to learn how, things like that are done, because there is a scientific approach to that, especially with consecration, evocation, invocation. There are methods to how to achieve this. Like evocation, for example, is like evoking the spirit in front of you, either within a triangle, a vessel, so that you can see them physically, or within you. So the first time I ever had a successful evocation of a demonic spirit, um, which was as which was Luganana, I think. It was in the middle of a dark black pitch room, and in front of me, I called it forth through chants and mantras, and I was in a meditative state. And all of a sudden, for right before me, a black cloud that was darker than darkness manifested, and I could see two eyes looking back at me, and that's when I just jumped off. I was like, nope, I'm done. It's like, because it scares you, because you think these, you're waiting for something like that to happen, and you're finally able to drop mind, and as soon as you drop mind, and something like that happens to you, which is just, most people won't believe, it does scare you. But then you get used over time to it, and then it's just like, just picking up the phone. It's like, hey, Lucifer, how are you doing today? Like something like that.
But this can be dangerous, right? Especially if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, um, for sure. There's people on left hand path that just say, just evoke the spirits, which I would recommend as well. Just know what you're calling on. Just do the research beforehand, because when you're stupid about it, stupid things will happen to you. So if you just go online and you look up a sigil that says, okay, it's a sigil is for this and that, and for this spirit, and you're just like, okay, cool. I sort of know how to, evoke that spirit of calling forth. Let's call it forth without doing research. That might be not so smart. Just do the research first, know where it's coming from, check out the background, then know your techniques, and then see what you have to do with that spirit. Now, within my practice, because of the information and the powers or understanding of how to move energies that I've gained, I no longer like protect myself really from anything. I just invite that spirit, because once again, what is happening when you are evoking a spirit or invoking, you are creating that moment where that can actually exist. So they are coming from outside, but the outside is within you. So you are creating that moment when that is actually possible. So you are the creator in that moment that makes that whole moment possible for that actually to exist. So they sort of not obey to your command, but you can definitely willingly stay as an equal with any kind of spirit, no matter what type of spirit it is. But there will be tricksters. There will be the demons. They will just cause harm. There are specters of deceased humans that might not have a good life, couldn't move on, and became very evil and noxious spirits. And these spirits, I would never recommend working with and just banishing them. So you do have to be careful. So I would recommend just learning the basics, getting into it gradually, not just thrusting yourself into that. And as soon as you got the practice in a little bit, go ahead and just jump into the pool, because that's the best thing to really do it, and that's how I do it all the time. I call on a spirit and I start a path working without knowing what's going to happen to me, because I sacrifice my entire life with that path working, because I want to gain that knowledge, or like want to change my reality drastically. So I give something up in return.
Mm.
Sort of what I would recommend. Just be careful and aware, but also be like sort of, I don't know, like just be open-minded.
You'd have to be really, really powerful and confident. Well, not powerful. Obviously, we're all powerful, but you'd have to really be very confident with your own power. I feel. I personally would not feel confident in doing some of the stuff that you say that you do, you know.
Yeah, and that's why you start somewhere. You start evoking like maybe like elemental gods. You start evoking goddesses and gods. Some people start with demons, like me. It just depends on what you feel comfortable with.
So,
And
so
then,
initially you're working with black magic, you're working with the darkness with the intention of light.
well, the light comes from within. That's sort of the misunderstanding about Lucifer as well, where Lucifer is not really demonic, a demonic spirit. He's more like he's a solar god. He's an angelic being, and he shines the inner light, and that is sort of the core principle about Luciferianism, where we are the light that guides ourselves. We are that divine spark. We recognize that, and that's why we choose to bring the power down to us, because we are the architect of our world, and we're not being submissive to any other spirit or god, because first of all we are source, they are coming from us, and we are all equals. While at the same time, we are in that moment humans. So there's an act of devotion and respect that's coming to the spirit, because for them, time is not really existing. For them, it's just an ever expanding moment, which is time. And for them, everything has happened and, gone into darkness all over again. So it's definitely important just to, to shine your own light and to stand there and trust your powers, and be in that moment of, certain vibration where you can access these.
Scott has a question. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to ask, do you have any texts in history, or do you know of any texts in history that you would say are the most relevant towards the path you followed? And I would follow that question with, does that text correlate to a specific religion or pantheon in the past that you most subscribe to?
That's a very good question again, which sort of ties in with another question we had before, which is almost every time the question I try to avoid, because for me, I just collected everything and started from one particular tiny source, especially on the internet in the information age, and then just making sure that I have all my documents, and then just doing the research, upon research, and then sort of dividing different pantheons, seeing where there's a map of truth that is being shown in every sort of religion, and taking that piece of truth out, and using it within my own practice. But for left hand path, once again, I would recommend E.A. Coetting. He has very good books on that, which like brings everything and boils everything down to the core principle of this. Which then gives you the entrance and the basic understanding of where you can go from there. But I would also recommend is, for example, if you want to like sort of gradually move into this, is spirit science, which most of you probably like heard about on YouTube. They sort of explain the metaphysical aspect to that. And that's actually how I started after my Samadhi awakening, going from that, understanding metaphysical aspects, going into like the more magical aspect on the left-hand path, which resonated with me because the God comes from within. And then starting to, read a few books here and there. But the practice and the understanding came from spiritual knowledge and not too many books. Because there's a lot of which we call armchair magicians that have read all the occult books, can tell you everything about it, but they've never practiced anything in their whole life. So I'm sort of the Generation Z child, where everything is out there in the open on the internet. Just got to be smart about it and know what is true and what is not. Taking that and then actually just practicing and learning with the spirits. So I would just recommend starting to sort of like go to E.A. Coetting, become a living God, spirit science, learn about metaphysics and how to evoke or invoke, work with spirits and magic, get the basic like principles in that, and then get the knowledge from the spirits themselves, because it will come to you as soon as you are moving into a certain direction, a path. These energies align with your life, and therefore you have synchronicities happening to you where the information will be revealed. The only thing you have to do is to have an open eye for that, or open ear. and it will come to you. I know that's maybe not the answer you want to hear, but that's sort of like how I could, would recommend that. And watch my channel because that's what I'm trying to do for the world, like giving them an access to it.
Okay, and can I ask you what your definition or in your own words would you explain gnosis?
Gnosis. Well, Gnosis is sort of a mixture of spiritual understandings coming from divine sources, which are then filtered and incorporated through your mind. Now, your mind is not just your brain, that is a big part of it, but your whole mind actually is your body and is coming from the gut. The whole energy systems and the pranic body are all part of this divine vessel you are in. And Gnosis is being filtered through. But Gnosis is essentially the spiritual knowledge that's coming from higher realms back to the material world.
Do you know of a way one could become more in tune with or initiate or begin the process of gnosis?
Yeah, start practicing. Start trying to call on spirits. Learn how to evoke them. It's really not that difficult. I mean, for example, let me pick a spirit right now. So I have some spirit slates. This is for Baal. What I would do, for example, and you can do that with any kind of paper. Just cut out a paper and draw the sigil of a spirit you want to work with and get gnosis from. And then you start looking at it and gazing at the spirit and start meditating with it. Just start gazing at the sigil, start meditating with it, and then just start thinking about the spirit and what you know. And then after a time, and when you start, becoming more like into that certain state of like meditation and trance, certain things will open up where you will like recognize an energy shift, or like you are hearing certain sounds, you're seeing certain symbols. You'll know because it's different for every individual. And then you start just continue to gaze at it and try to give it your energy. And then just call forth the spirits, write something out. It doesn't have to be perfect or like sound fancy. Say something like, Baal, I call you forth, come to me right now and aid me in my quest to gather gnosis, and repeat that as a mantra, repeat it and repeat it. And then it will come forth one way or the other. Because most of the time people get frustrated because they think nothing is coming through, but the spirit is talking to them. So if you don't have the ability to essentially like hear spirits like sonically, or see them, they will come to you with that message in a different way. So you might be walking down the streets and there's a stranger that tells you something, but it's that what he told you is sort of in line with what you asked the spirits, and you're like, hey, wait a second. Oh, that was not that person that was saying that. That was the spirit working through them. And that's how you gain gnosis. And then you just got to have an open eye, open third eye, and that way you are experiencing reality from a much broader aspect. And when you do this for a long time, everything becomes magic and everything becomes spiritual because you can gain gnosis from a rock.
Gotcha. Another question: someone who walks your path, or you specifically, how much value do you put in texts like the Bible or like the Vedic texts, or just like ancient texts of those nature? Does like, I know you've recommended E.A. Quetting and some more modern sources as well with Aleister Crowley, but like ancient texts like the Bible, do you put any value in texts like those?
So, well, thank you for the question. The Bible is an interesting topic because the Bible itself is a grimoire, a magical grimoire, which has what do you call it in English? Not traps, but they are the ways it is written has hidden knowledge and information behind it. If you can sort of look behind that symbolism and the perspective of many hundreds of people rewriting the Bible from what originally was, coming in also from the Old Testament, and then trying to go back to the sources and cutting out the bullshit, which is always the important stuff, and get back to the core principles, you'll start to see that, sort of that there's a tree that is sort of connecting all branches and it's also coming down to the same root, even the Bible. And then it depends on how you see the world and how, your perception of it is, and, what your truth about reality is and what you can pick from that. The Bible necessarily It's just that, it has been rewritten so many times that, what you get nowadays, essentially the latest version, which was written in the 1700s, which is now the most popular one. I can't remember the name of the author who put that all together. Um, is the main thing that is now being presented. But going back to the old scriptures like the Vedas, they have much better spiritual knowledge in there because there are no blinds in it. It's not about controlling people. It's about spiritual development and liberation. So I would always, go, if you want to read the scriptures, go to these sort of places instead of going to something that was in between, like the Bible and that sort of religions that were the government of that time.
Right. Gotcha. Well, I appreciate your information. I know Scott had a question, so I'm gonna step down.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Issa. Yeah, Scott was asking, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't on mute. I thought I was on mute again. Do you have experience with remote viewing?
Yes. I'm actually not the biggest astral traveler because of certain rituals and consecrations that I've done on me and that were done on me. I can't explain it. It's just a little bit difficult, and you shouldn't believe some sort of nonsense that I would talk about that because it really goes into like the realm of fantasy almost because it's that unbelievable. But remote viewing is my core go-to nowadays because I don't have much time to like fully meditate for 2 hours and just travel outside of my body. Remote viewing is sort of still being within your body and just projecting your consciousness outside, which can be a good gateway for astral travel and soul travel to really fully go out of your body. But there are ways and techniques and how that could be done. But for beginners, and what I use every day is remote viewing. It's the best option to do that because you can stay within your body. You don't have to know how to fully go outside of it. Because what can happen when you astral travel, first of all, what most people don't understand is that you're not really traveling. You are already present on all frequencies, on all layers of existence. You're just becoming aware of it. So you are, projecting yourself also with your soul outside with your energy body that needs to be built up, or certain techniques and like breathing techniques, yoga, whatever it is out there can be used for that, or rituals. And then you go out there and you become aware in that moment, and you can move around by interlocking yourself to certain paths, and then going along with that and traveling up to source. That could be done, has been done. I've done that, and you can come back and collapse back into your human body. But remote viewing is easier because you are able to remember it. Because what can happen is if you don't have enough energy and sort of the practice behind becoming lucid and staying lucid, which is being aware, you can come back and not remember it because you were not lucid. It's the same thing with lucid dreaming. When you go into a dream and you wake up in the dream, realizing you're dreaming, you either wake up in that moment because you're getting, oh my God, I'm dreaming, or you can stay awake and sort of like move around. It could also be a gateway from astral traveling because then you're like, I'm aware right now, my body's asleep, so I can just like, pop out and just go. So that's sort of my experience and how I view and do remote viewing. I hope that could help.
Thanks. I have a question about sex, sacred energy exchange. What really is sex? Because I know that they're hiding power, that they're hiding a secret about sex, and I can't work out what the secret is.
Well, that's tantra for you. Tantra, well, sex is creation. It's the union of Shakti and Shiva. It's the male and the female essence. It's a coming together because what most people also don't realize is, well, for everyone that goes back to the question of like what you should check out the Kabbalion and Hermetic principles. Very important for your understanding reality in a physical plane because we are so far away from source union. You can imagine like a glowing ball of light that just expands itself infinitely, and the more consciousness and God experiences itself or source through different avenues and ways of looking at itself, which is what we are, you'll have less energy and it becomes more dense because the frequency is just becomes higher and higher and lower and lower. And then you have separation, which is the illusion, which is Maya. Everything is not really existing. Everything you see here, the laptop, my background, the walls, they will not exist in thousands of years or hundreds of years. Everything is constantly changing. And that comes back to the dualistic nature of reality here in a physical plane. So when you have the union of male and female, which is both aspects of creation, you can tap into that power and do amazing results with it. There's sex magic, for example, where you use that power of the orgasm, the male orgasm and the female orgasm, and you can use that to manifest certain things. There's just so many ways what you can do with sex and orgasm, or you can have an awakening. You can awaken your kundalini through tantra. There's just so many methods. It's a scientific approach within spirituality, and magic as sex is very powerful for that. Like one. Sorry, go ahead.
Say it.
No, I just meant to say, like, one thing that is sort of like a joke within the occult field is a part of chaos magic, which we also all do, is when you give semen, your cum or your orgasm, or like female fluids on a sigil or an object and consecrate that with it, it becomes a very powerful divine creation, which is consecration. You are making something that is, normal into a divine vessel, being, whatever, giving it power. And a lot of people, what they would do is they draw the sigil, make their own, work with a demon, and just masturbate in front of that and give it that power, and just use that sexual fluid as like a battery, for example, or a cheat code.
That's interesting. So is it irresponsible to have unconscious sex? I obviously don't mean like being unconscious, but I mean obviously unconsciously having sex. Is that quite irresponsible then?
No, hey, if you like to indulge in the flesh and the pleasures of that, indulge in it. I like to do that a lot of times. So it's there's nothing that is wrong about that. What should be considered though is like you giving off energy and you're connecting to someone. So there's definitely that aspect where, like, for a man, for example, the more you have sex, the more you're depleting your energy, sort of, not fully, of course, but you're giving something away, you're giving your seed away, and a woman takes in, but you're also giving off energy and you're connecting to a man. So it depends on what you want to take in and give out. So definitely choose wisely, because you will always be connected as soon as you have intercourse with someone, and definitely, or you cut the ties.
Do the demons prefer blood?
Most of them. No one does. So every spirit you can work with, you can give them an offering of blood, but no one recommends it. And then no one really, no spirit or demon will come to you and say, I want blood. There will be some, sure, but that's a minor, but it's not really something that needs to happen. Like, they don't come as like, give me your blood, or like slaughter chicken. You can give that as an offering, and that's a huge respect and an energy exchange. But it's really commonly used from the left-hand path for sure. But you don't even have to give them much. Like what I would used to do, for example,
The sound went. Can you speak into the mic? Is it just me?
No, it went.
No, it's me as well.
I lost you at giving what you can do.
Yeah, I gathered from your movements that you took a needle and pricked your finger.
No. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back.
Yeah, there we go.
No, I was just going. Where did I cut off?
What you do to gather the blood for your offering.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so like they don't want blood necessarily. You can give them that. It's a huge sign of respect, and it gives a lot of power out. And you just prick your finger with a lancet or a small needle, and just one little drop will do the job. Like, no one really needs to like just bleed and cut their wrist like it's shown on TV and stuff like that. It's not really necessary at all.
Got you.
But one thing I must say though is, excuse me, there are cheat codes. So the more energy you're able to put into something, the more you'll get out of it. And if you don't know how to move energies just with yourself, because I know, like, my colleagues within that field that also offer ritual for hires like me and do services. They live in Texas, and they are sacrificial magicians and witches, which is sort of a root work folk tradition, and they have their own breed of chickens, which they grow and feed, and they use that within their rituals, which is also used within voodoo and all over the world. It's just frowned upon, and they use that. Then they cut the head off the chicken, and they use the blood to give that offering to spirit or to a higher soul of a client or person to fuel that energy into it. And then taking also the soul of that animal and fusing that in. That can be done. It's a huge power surge, but it's not necessary at all.
Gotcha.
So these sentient beings are dying for no reason.
Well, if you look at the world right now, if you have mass production of animals living in farms under very dire situation and conditions, and these animals are used within sacrifice. I can't speak for everyone that sacrifices. I really can't. I just know the persons that do. They grow them themselves, or they get them from someone, and they use everything. They cut off the head, they slaughter it themselves, and then they use the bones, the feathers, and they use everything of that animal. And that animal is also viewed, as a gift from the gods, and it's cherished. It's not just thrown away. If you really go into the grocery store right now, there are so many slaughtered chickens and pigs and whatever cows that no one really cared about, and they were just killed on the spot. So that's actually a way more humane way to go as an animal than what's happening right now. But I do understand it's not necessary. You don't have to kill an animal to do that. It's just part of the lifetime path or other folk traditions like voodoo that is still being done by a lot of people in India, Africa, a lot of places.
I understand. Does anyone else have any more questions before we wrap it up? Nope. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really insightful. I feel like we're definitely going to have to get you back on for some deeper topics, because this is even like pushing my perception. But I'm really intrigued because I want to see it from a different perspective. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm always quite light-based. Not saying all the time, obviously. Do you know what I mean? I understand that you need the darkness and the light, but this is pushing my perception, which is really interesting. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate everyone that was able to come on as well.
Well, thank you for having me on. I hope everyone enjoyed this little presentation and the Q&A afterwards. And thanks for giving me an opportunity. And I would love to jump on again. We can talk about what I could present, and we can go from there.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much. I'll speak to you all soon, and see you next week on the next workshop.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.